Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1455's Summer Festival 2021. This is the panel Goan Stories on Canvas, and it's my great pleasure to be in conversation today with the Goan artists Karishma De Souza and Angela Ferrão. Now, I've had the opportunity to work with both of these artists in the past, this is, it's wonderful to be in conversation with them. Oddly enough, we're actually all in Goa at this moment, but clearly not in the same place. But if nothing else, it allows us to have this conversation on a global stage, I guess. So a little bit about Goa first, for those of you who may not know that much about it. A very small place with a big history, big world history, really. In 1510, Goa was conquered by the Portuguese and became the capital of its Indo-Portuguese Empire. And although that suggests that it was an empire that was only situated in Asia, really, it was much larger than that. It was an empire that included Africa for a while as well. In 1961, Goa ceased to be a part of Portugal and was handed over or invaded or taken over by India, and has since then been part of the Indian nation state. Because of this handover between the Portuguese and the Indians, Goa has both occupied a peripheral place in the Indian nation state and has also led to lots of issues. Tourism is one of the big economic mainstays in Goa, and this has raised many issues, as tourism has in so many parts of the world, both relating to the economy and the identity of Goans and Goa. These are some of the subjects that my guests today take up in their art and which we'll have an opportunity to speak of, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. So a little bit about both of our guests today. I'm going to start with Angela. Angela Ferrão is an illustrator and satirical cartoonist. She's published a book for children called Phyllis Plays with the Sun. That's a 2013 title. She's also illustrated a book of Goan stories for children and been part of an anthology of gender-based stories where her narrative dealt with women's employment. She has worked in different media, from animation to instructional design. Her main interests are humor, through which she attempts to show the irony of social and political life in her home state of Goa and the world. Her work appears in several publications, including countercurrents.org, Tehelka, eTropic, and others. You can see her work on social media, on Instagram, with the handle Ferrão Designs, and that same handle is available on Facebook, where she also hosts some of her work. Next, we have Karishma De Souza, who's a visual artist based in Goa. Her recent solo exhibitions include Invocation in Paris in 2020. The year before, she showed in Brussels with a show called Midway Mark. In Lisbon in 2018, she had an exhibition called History Roots. She's also been part of group exhibitions, including Endless State at Skowhegan Alliance in 2020, Distance at the Dorsey Gallery in New York in 2019, and The Scope and The Scape at Dow Gallery, Art Gallery in Mumbai, and New Dawn in Berlin in 2014. She's held residencies at the Rijks Academy in 2012-2013 and the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in 2017. Her work can be seen in the collections of the Centre National des Arts Plastiques in France and the Utrecht Central Academy Museum in the Netherlands. You can learn more about Karishma's work at her website, which is karishmadesouza.com. and on Instagram at KDSZ_. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Benedito Ferrão. I'm an assistant professor of English and Asian and Pacific Islander American Studies at the College of William and Mary at Williamsburg in Virginia. So thanks very much, Karishma and Angela, for joining me. I'm really happy that you accepted my invitation to be part of this panel, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today. I'm going to start by asking you just really a basic question, really, about, your first memory of creating art and how you kind of came to, this realization that you were an artist, really. And maybe if you could also tell your audience a little bit about the medium in which you operate. And shall we start with you, Angela, please?
Hi, thanks. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you. You forgot to add that we are not related. So I've said that. Okay. Uh, in case we are accused of nepotism. But my first memory as a published artist, I think, and when I realized I was an artist, couldn't have been when I was banging clay in the nursery. So it has to be my book at after a long struggle to get it out, and it was published in 2013. It's a book for children, and called Fuller's Plays with the Sun, which you introduced. And that was something that was, I was trying to get it published all over the place, and finally I had to write it and illustrate it. So that was one of the first. And subsequently, my cartoons started appearing in newspapers. I mean, not in a big, not every day. But I had a stint with the Goan, which was like editorial cartoonist. So I had my cartoons appearing every day. So that was the first time, and it was it was a good run. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And over to you, Karishma.
Yeah, I think I do have a very early memory of that was very fascinating. As a child, my father basically he drew two things for me. One was he drew two squares and then joined them with lines and made it into a cube. So you had this three-dimensional thing on a two-dimensional surface. That was mind-blowing. And then he also drew an elephant, like a very basic elephant. But the thing is that we were on a ship, because I was taken on a merchant navy vessel a lot. My father worked there, and family was mostly with him. So it was like a conjuring of an elephant out at sea. So I think that besides not having children to play with, really, so I was painting and drawing a lot since a young age. But I think these two were what got me fascinated about conjuring things, kind of like just being able to communicate something that wasn't really present at all, except in somebody's mind, and then it becomes the real, and then it stays, and then a lot of people, whoever, like your family or the paper lasts longer than it helps the thought last longer. That I feel now, of course, but yeah, those two, what my father drew, basically.
And the medium in which you create, mostly?
Watercolors and oil paintings. Yeah.
Great.
And prints, serigraphy. Okay.
So fairly diverse range, thanks. I also wondered, do you have a memory of what your first commission was? And so, where your work was seen publicly after being commissioned, and what the reaction was to that. Back to you, Angela.
I think the first one was in, as I can recall, it was in the Herald. It was
which is a local newspaper in Goa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't recall a previous publication, but it was relevant to me because a lot of my work hinges on criticizing the events that go on in Goa and the world at large. So this particular incident was when we had all gone out to protest against the alleged murder of a local priest who was also an activist, Father Bismarck Dance. And I had done this cartoon where we were, taken into the police van, and we were all like, women, the church groups had gone to stand out and ask justice. And we were just taken into these vans by the local police. And the next day it was, all over the newspapers. Those were the days when the newspapers wanted to, say something for the people, which was the truth. So that was one of my first, which really, I made an impact on me at least. Because it showed the scene of, police and the public, how we are subjected to.
So you really had a very public kind of like first commission. That was, your introduction to the world as an artist then.
Yeah, on paper, right. On paper, because my work is a digital. A lot of it is mostly online. So when it comes on the paper, even if it ends up as bin liner, it's great because somebody looks at it.
I think one of the really interesting things in Goa is that, when you go to buy fruit and veg, for example, it comes wrapped up in local newspaper, right? So sometimes, there have been occasions where, I found my articles lining the fruit and veg, right? So I'm like, oh, another opportunity to read it.
Yeah, and sometimes we do read it. I think that's a lost art, where you can actually, oh, I missed this article. Don't eat neatly so that I can read it.
Yeah, just sitting, going home. Yeah.
And for you, Karishma, what was your first commission that was publicly seen, and what was the reaction to it? And is that what you expected the reaction to be, and so on?
Yeah, I think there were a few, because I think it started in art college, because at the end, like sometimes in the middle, or definitely at the end of the course, they have an exhibition in the art college, and it's open to the public. So I guess my first showing was at the Goa College of Art at the end of my bachelor's course of 5 years. I must say I used to, I'm pretty reclusive, so I didn't really I didn't really hang around for that exhibition, the next exhibition, and the exhibition at the Rijksacademie. So I sort of just put up the work, and I tended to disappear. But I'd like to talk about maybe the Rijksacademie, the work at the Rijksacademie. So I have one of the images over here.
Yeah, be great to see it.
Like I shared it.
And while you're doing that, one of the questions that struck me was, have you shown some of the same pieces both in Goa and abroad, like, for example, at the Rijksacademie? And was there a different reaction between the two places?
Yes, I did show. I showed the works that were at the Fundisa Orient in 2017, I think it was, and then that work was reshown in Paris at an exhibition. I think that I think that actually what is a bit more interesting was the works that were shown in Lisbon, and then those works were shown in Paris. And I guess it was in Lisbon that a bit more was understood of the history already. So you didn't really have to, there was a lot of ground covered in that sense. And in Paris, it was mostly much more questions and like kind of conversations and answering with, I think so, it also has to do with the spaces you show it in, because in Lisbon there was and in Goa the opening had more artists than anybody else. So, and it's also like who in Goa I knew all the artists who came in. So it was basically friends and colleagues from the Goa College of Art. So it leads to totally different conversations.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And just for our audience as well, the Fundasar Orient Gallery, which Karishma mentioned, is a local gallery here in Goa, but she took the same exhibition to other places as well. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying about, you know, the audience being either people you know or don't know, but then the space itself, and then also the local context where history may or may not be known. That makes sense. So with this piece that you're showing us, if you could tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so this was also from it was an open studio, the open studio at the Rijks Academy. So I had gone to Europe. It was the first time as in like yeah, it was my first time also living in Europe and also visiting. So so the work was really about back in India. You had kind of Goa in the top band with the mining, and Bombay in a way in the middle band. So and Baroda, where I had lived for 8 years to doing my master's, and then continued to live at the bottom. So the veranda space that overlooks Bombay and then Goa, like kind of geographically moving. Now the thing is that I didn't really, I think sometimes with work, at least in my work, I kind of have these things in my mind. I don't generally I don't necessarily speak about it then. So I've been lucky to have been able to have exhibitions like 10 years after the work is done, where the work is then contextualized in retrospect by my own writing. But I mean, so I've had two exhibitions where you've had work from Baroda and then from the current years. So you have work from like 2011, 2010, and then 2019, you know, and they the coming together lets you able to speak about things that you didn't really want to speak about then, you know, or have or you hadn't like you just had basic like your experiential knowledge, but not really you weren't able to put it into words yet. It came into the work, but you weren't able to speak about that. You know, like, so this work was an example of that. I didn't write about what it was about, and I didn't answer any questions about it either. You know?
No, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what you're saying really is that, in a sense, even though the canvas stays the same, you as the artist are always evolving. And so it's not only the changes that you are experiencing as the world around you changes, but that it also brings new meaning to a canvas you may have painted earlier.
Yes, and also very, as Angela kind of also said in our conversations earlier, when I came back to Goa in 2014, it was very important for me as well that there were theorists writing from Goa from my generation. And I think that was for me to a kind of key to open up putting things into words as well, like feeling that, okay, you know, I can also say that this is what the paintings are about. Before that, it was like a bit of a vacuum, I felt, especially like you and the other writers at the Alzulage Collective. I think it made a difference that it was our generation as well. So it was, you know, and yeah, from the community too, like, you know, and from Goa. Yeah, that was very important.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for that. Angela, I wondered, do you have examples of your earlier work that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, sure.
And I think, Karishma, you'll have to end the show. There we go. Yeah. And then as you're doing that, I wonder what was did you have anything to add to what Karishma was just saying about, how she finds herself, going back to older pieces maybe and rethinking them, or how the conversation evolves for you, even if a piece, is done already.
I don't have any such profound thoughts because my work is usually just, on the fly. I say it, I get it out. I hope most people see it. I hope it irritates them. I hope it makes them think. Hopefully it does. If it doesn't, bin liners always there. So I don't know. When I look back at my work, I just think of, like it as a milestone in the times that I try to document. It's just incidents that catch my mind.
Yeah. So what's this particular one we're looking at? What year is this from, by the way?
This, I think, is 2015 or 16. I'm not sure. 2016, 15, somewhere. Time is a very, it has no, I can't pin it.
I think that has a lot to do with the pandemic as well.
I don't know. I'd like, at least I can blame something now. So, but this is something I was referring to earlier about being, all the housewives and church groups being, bullied by these. Suddenly we had these massive cops, which we never knew existed, because when we walk down our lonely roads and we shout, help, help, you don't see anyone. But suddenly when we went with this little placard and rosaries, suddenly these very robust men came out of vans and, hustled us in, and we were, all my mother and aunties and everybody was being led around. So this is one of those, this was published in the local newspaper.
And this is in relation to the event that you mentioned earlier, which was the, like you said, the alleged murder of a local priest, Father Bismarck, and an incident which, by the way, has not been fully resolved, if I'm not mistaken. And so what you were saying was that there were actually local protests, and the protests were of such a nature that you saw lots of just average, everyday folk being involved, like you said, women from the village and so on.
This is just a microcosm of what I've captured. What was going on was like a cautionary tale for future protests. So, we had many of these things, and then, there was a film festival going on at the time. So very conveniently, they had this section 144, which is leftover from the colonial era. So,
and that's a law about not a certain number of people being allowed to gather.
Right.
Right.
So this is one of them, and this is this also.
And we should say that Father Bismarck was very popular in Goa, but the reason he was popular was not so much because, or not only because he was a priest, but also because he was an activist.
Right, yes. And I mean, he struck a chord among the young Goans because he was born and brought up in Goa. He had a lot. He was very open in his thoughts and what he wanted for Goa. And, it wasn't something mega. It was just keeping the environment as we had been bequeathed, right? So this is another one which also appeared along with Dale Lewis Menezes' article on Father Bismarck. So I've had the
which paper was this one in, Angela?
This was the Herald.
Okay. The Herald, for our audience, is the longest running newspaper in Goa, originated during the Portuguese colonial era and was initially published in Portuguese and still runs today, but appears in English. And I believe they've got either Marathi or Konkani version as well.
I don't know about Marathi, but there is a Konkani version, and
right.
They've kind of started brushing aside a little space to make a little paragraph for Portuguese.
That's right, in the Sunday paper. So, yeah. Great. Thank you. It's lovely to see these earlier works of yours.
Yeah, it's quite a sight. So this is another one. I mean, like, if we're talking about what's appeared in the news and what has shaped the narrative around my work. So this was one of them, written by Jason Keith Nandes, another one of the writers in Goa who also influenced my work, which includes you, Amita Kanikar, Vishwesh, and of course Dale, who I had a very nice, just to digress maybe, but he mentioned something in his writing which at the time I didn't get, like about how, Batkar, Munkar, kind of, wanting to be like them. And at the time I didn't understand it, but as I keep reading about history, I begin to see his writings as.
So Badkar and Munkar being landlord and tenant relationships, which are left over from the feudal agricultural history of Goa, but the politics of which continue to play out in the contemporary period. So I feel like what you're saying, Angela, is that, and Karishma was mentioning this as well, that both of you find yourselves to be in conversation with local writers who are thinking about Goa from various perspectives, and which is something that perhaps, them being of the same generation as you, perhaps occupying a space that didn't even exist before. But what I find really compelling about that is this, for both of you, that really your art is in conversation with these other people from Goa. So that's really interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've done some of my cartoons based on what you've written as well,
right,
for the Goan. So, it's it kind of bounces off ideas. So, like, you're thinking of you're putting into visual what you have expressed in words.
Yeah.
Kind of. So that's.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. So I want to pull back a little bit and ask my next question of both of you. I said in the beginning a little bit about Goa, just to give our listeners, some perspective historically. But from a contemporary vantage point, if you were to say something to our audience about Goa today and its contemporary moment, what do you think, to someone who doesn't really know that much about Goa, what do you think they should know about Goa in the present moment? And we can start with you, Angela, and then go on to Karishma.
I thought you'd never ask me.
Let loose, please.
I've been waiting to say this, but I would tell someone who just landed in Goa, that this is not your Neil Armstrong moment. This place has been discovered. There are people here who've lived here for centuries. You're not taking a small step for mankind or for boho, sobo kind, or whatever it is kind you're coming from. There have been people here, decent, generous, loving, warm people. Be kind and tread softly.
Thank you for that. Thanks. And Karishma?
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know. I think it's true. So, like, you come to a place, the place is made by the people in that place, so it didn't just, and like living in other places for a while, you can understand that, like in Baroda, the ethos of people of the place makes everything, that way, architecture to how the city is, or whether a tree is kept or not. So yeah, I think in a way, I think there needs to be more knowledge gathered before an opinion is created. Not a superficial look at a place, especially if with the I read that Goa is I mean, it is the smallest state in India, but it has the highest immigration into it. So I think in that kind of a situation where you have a huge demographic change, there really needs to be like keeping even the tourism aside, with people who are moving in. I feel there's almost an education before speaking or writing, you know, a kind of intake.
Right.
I would like, even, I guess, for all of us, at least even I put myself in that, but I think that especially yeah, just going a bit deeper into the communities and the societies that are in the place, you know.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. That makes sense. Both of you have used your art as social commentary, you know, for various reasons. This is something you've touched on already, but if we could go a little bit more in depth, perhaps, and you know, if you could speak more specifically to some of the themes that you find recurring in your work. And Karishma, do you have examples perhaps to show as well? We could start with you and then go on to Angela. I know that lately you've been thinking quite a bit about the environment, for example, and then also perhaps some of the issues that you just spoke of, right? So the movement of people, and then I think that perhaps even caste and identity is something that comes across quite clearly in your art. Regionality too.
Yeah, I think
And then similarly, Angela, while Karishma is looking up pieces to share with us, what are some of the themes that you find recurring in your work?
Well, my work usually is, you know, I try to get, I mean, it just so happens that I get into the environmental space and the political, because they both seem to, you know, feed off each other. I mean, they affect each other, like political, you know, decisions affect environmental outcomes, right? So a lot of my work has a lot of environmental, social, you know, disparities.
Yeah, and you find that those keep on coming up in the work.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just kind of draw the same thing in a different, with a more practiced hand, or, you know, a little better style maybe. So it's like just the same thing recurring, you know, especially the environmental things.
Yeah, no, I think in both of your work, in addition, I mean, certainly in your work, Angela, the issue of tourism comes up clearly. But then in both of your work, for example, that very first image that Karishma showed us had to do with mining. And I know that that's something, that's certainly a big topic in Goa, because perhaps second to tourism, mining is one of the major kinds of components of the local economy, and is certainly affected not only the economy, but also the environment, right? Because it's an extractive industry, right? Karishma, did you have something to share with us?
yeah, I think it also has to do with what laws and rules one lives in a state within this larger state. You know? So you have all these states in India, and the center makes a lot of rules that has to do with things that seem not to be quite fleshed out, and it's pushed through. So you kind of, there are issues in this sort of what are the laws that kind of are placed on each state. So I think in some senses, much of the work is also like, it speaks about the like local gods also, like local deities, like the anthill being in Goa. People know that you kind of have anthills. There's something sacred about the place around, and so it's not, so it has to kind of the lawmaking has to come from the from the minute moving up outwards, not quite the other way around, which is what
and the anthill is so specifically Goan in terms of a religious animistic belief system. So it actually really also points to how the ecology, the environment has always been a concern of people in Goa, and that's changed quite dramatically over time because of political and economic kinds of changes in the landscape.
Yeah. Also, like who came here first? Like the anthills and the people who say that it was they're sacred, and they had all these deities of each area. Well, much before anybody else. It doesn't matter what kind of myths were made about the people who came in afterwards. So till today, you can't really speak about those mythologies that are taken for like historical strange fact.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think this work is also kind of about something coming from elsewhere, not something coming from elsewhere moving through the forests here, So you kind of have these four guardian flames on the corners. And then you have something that will move to the forest and then hopefully move out, So you kind of just have this passing through thing. So I also try to say that these things are going to pass, like they will come and then they will go, and this will, like, the forest will remain, and the people will also remain. It doesn't matter if they're getting like you feel a bit kind of overpowered at the moment, and that it's moment kind of momentary, long moment, but yeah, that it is the last I'll show.
Okay.
It is about hearing, listening, like listening to people, basically. This pretty much also to do with like the laws that are being pushed down people's throats now.
It strikes me, that both of you, and this is something I appreciate about the art that both of you make, is that you don't shy away from the message that you're trying to convey. But I wonder, how is that message received?
Way more direct. I mean, they're very different that way. I tend to want to I'll say different. Like the work is about that, but it's not really. You can't really probably make out in the work what it's about. You can. So yeah, I don't, in that sense, put my head on the block in that to that,
But you are offering social commentary. I think that's
in a very roundabout way.
For both of you, then, do you think that there's a different reaction to your work from Goans versus non-Goans? Angela?
Well, I don't really know about people's reaction because nobody pays me, so I wouldn't know. Now, I mean, I think since people seem to have suddenly started sending me friend requests, I don't know if there is some sort of a free offer which I've been linked with or what, I don't have any idea. But I have absolutely no real idea of how people react to my work. But I do it to express my views, and If someone so happens to like it, then it's great. I mean, you know, I can't please everyone, and I'm not out there to.
Right, right. Perhaps moving into slightly more controversial territory here. Not that anything that's already been said is not, controversial. I think, anytime Goans speak about Goa, it can be such a radical act because there's so few opportunities really either for Goans to speak about, their feelings on Goa or for them to be heard really. So, there's that.
Allowed.
Right.
Allowed to speak.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I think in that vein, there's many cultural events and festivals that do take place in Goa, yet their focus doesn't, appear to be necessarily Goan. It has much to do with the conception of Goa and the Indian imagination, mostly because it's only thought of as being a tourism destination rather than a place that has its own culture and its own history and leave alone its own people, right, who have something to say. Is this something that you have, encountered? Is it something that you grapple with as artists? We'll start with you, Angela. Yeah.
No, I don't view these things as um, beneficial to the local Goans, either the artists or the local businesses or anyone. It's just a staging place for these people, and I mean it has no percolation right down to us. So and the themes are not we cannot relate to them. Normal Goan will not relate to any of those themes that are displayed because there is no resonance. It's just it's just a stage for these people where they feel safe to you know uh, display their thoughts, which might not be palatable in other parts of India from where they come from. And I don't know why they don't start breaking ground there, because ground has already been broken here through generations of our own people. So I think, as an artist, to have start a conversation elsewhere where you really would like to make a change would be more beneficial.
So in a way, what you're saying really is that even the intended audience is not Goa or Goans.
No, I've never gone to one of them because I mean, I don't know how to react to those kind of things, because even exhibitions in Bombay, when you have these, and it's excellent. The location of some of the exhibition centers, that you can a lay person can just walk in and react to the art, and that's so wonderful, which you don't understand till you don't have it, because in Goa it's so there are these things aren't accessible to the public.
Right.
I don't
Right.
have anything to show anywhere. It is at certain places. So
Yeah.
it has no relevance or
Is that your, do you have a similar or different reaction, Karishma? And here I'm thinking also of, the fact that you actually studied art in Goa. Do you find that there are venues for the expression of, Goans themselves in terms of art, or when there are these events that appeal, as Angela is saying, not necessarily to a Goan audience? How do you as an artist react to them, if at all?
Yeah, yeah. I think I just think of the Kochi Biennale, for instance. I think when it comes to it, it finally, if it's set up by somebody from the place, it's all inclusive from the start. The idea of behind setting it up is already something very different from when there's just a lot of money poured in and ideas from elsewhere. And as Angela said, the place then becomes a kind of it becomes a stage, and like a liberal, like the liberal space in India where things fly.
Mm.
Whereas I think that the issues are the kind of are more in the basis of how the art education is in Goa, like the Goa College of Art, for instance, which right now has some new teachers, but it was floundering for what it gave us. I think is a kind of feeling of anarchy, which was very good for an artist, like, you know, but not not very much else in the massive politics that was going on in the place, which is caste based, a lot of discrimination related to caste and class, and a kind of inward lookingness, which then doesn't really help art education of a young person, you know.
Right.
And in that sense, moving on to even a museum, you know, there's no, you had a space which was a very beautiful space, the old secretariat, which was the Adil Shah Palace, which was earmarked for the museum, the Museum of Goa, which would show Gaitonde, and you know, where you have people then not needing to say that we have not heard, we've never seen a Gaitonde, we've never seen like Vamona's work, Vamona Navelkar's, or you know, we've seen Lakshman Pai's work hanging really high in the the Goa Medical College, where you know you don't even know if that is Lakshman Pai's work unless you've gone through art college, maybe, you know, and then you.
Did you
So
say Goa Medical College? Sorry to interrupt. Did you say Goa Medical College?
yeah, there's a work of Lakshman Pai hanging there.
How?
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
happened to know it because I was standing in line to go and meet the doctor, you know, and it's in
yeah,
the
Yeah,
waiting
exactly.
room. So, and I had you know, I had gone through 5 years of art college. He was the ex-principal. I knew who, like, I could recognize his work, but it's like this dusty, you know, you feel like, what is it? Is that
mm,
like a mural done on card? So I think there's a large endemic problem in this
yeah.
state. It doesn't recognize its own cultural creations.
No, I mean, I think you're rehearsing points, you know, in a conversation that, you know, both of us and me and Angela have had multiple times about how, because Goa went from being a colony of the Portuguese to being a colony of India, there hasn't been room to develop, you know, things about Goan literature or Goan art or Goan film in the local, institutionally, right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say, Benny, without that room, there's been amazing works
Yeah.
from the state, you know, from the music, or it just over generations, it's just even till today not been documented, and that's where I think the anger comes in, where
Mm-hmm.
you might really enjoy going for a mega exhibition, but you also know the history in, like, that is in Goa, that's then kind of suddenly come up, and it's an every a yearly thing. But then you know the history that when it came to the museum, a permanent museum of art in Goa, or, you know, like, it just wasn't pushed, and then suddenly something which just lands up from somewhere else, there's like the red carpet rolled out for it. So it's a very strange situation of self abasement almost, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm completely with you. And, you know, I think it's very worrying, right? When one speaks to particularly, you know, younger people, and you discover that they, you know, I think you're absolutely right, Karishma. It's not that there isn't a proliferation of work by Goan people, but, you know, the awareness of it, if we're talking about it at an institutional level, be it from, you know, the lack of a museum where one can go visit and see works by Goan artists, or art criticism or art history that, you know, revolves around the work of Goan artists, right? And you know, so there's most of the work that happens around that is extra institutional. It's not happening either within institutions or, you know, if there are exhibitions in Goa, they're not meant to cater to a Goan art history, right? Or so that is worrying, because it's like, you know, where are the opportunities for young people to learn about themselves through the humanities, through art, and so on? Yeah. Yeah, Angela, any other thoughts on that subject, or more work to show us, perhaps?
I have a lot of work, but I don't. We can move to the next question because
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Despite the lack of institutional support, or, Angela, as you were saying, one might get lots of attention on social media, lots of friend requests, which doesn't necessarily translate into being supported in your art, either critically or economically, right? Do you still find opportunity for community with other Goan artists? You did speak about your interaction with, writers who are Goan, who are now speaking about, Goa. But what about the art fraternity or sorority in Goa itself, Angela?
well, my sorority consists of just Karishma. And it's quite all right. I'm very happy that she even reciprocates my admiration for her work, which I find so wonderful. You know, and I've seen a lot of work, but I find her work so, you know, like admirable, you know. Um, yeah, but I mean, as for community, I don't know. I mean, I guess you would have to have a network of people, which I don't. So, but I'm happy to commune in an
Yeah,
whatever, and not also. Let me put
right,
this.
right.
So yeah, anyways.
Right. Do you think that's also a product of the lack of institutionality in Goa, which we were speaking about before? So like, when things are done around art, it's from an outsider perspective. It's not to develop local Goan, community, art community.
Yeah, it's kind of it's not very structured. I think there's not one point of reference where you can go to and like create some sort of an event. It seems to be a very these things seem to be gatekeeping sort of things, where if you know the right person, then that person will enhance your path and clear it towards joining not other local goans but other outsiders, and you will be the one token maybe. That sort of thing I've noticed, like not because, as Karishma said and rightly, there are some fantastic Goan artists, which I would say why are they not as spoken about, as showcased?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a big question. Absolutely. Yeah. Karishma, what about you?
Yeah, I think also it has to do with, it really has to do with education. I think starting from maybe school level, where you are exposed to, but it comes back to what are you then exposed to. So yes, you're right, I guess, institutions, because if there is a museum where you have, like, you can listen to Asha Bose. You can listen to Goan musicians, and you can, there's some like a permanent museum where you can see these works. Then you would have schools being able to take their students into these spaces. So I think the cultural education has to start young, and for that you do need these institutions that children can be taken to, and not just shown some images online or I mean, where would you take them? You have to see original works, and yeah, I think even music has to be in, like, moving into going to concerts. And so there's a whole, I think there's no, there were a lot of concerts in Kala Academy, or there were some amazing Indian classical concerts that came in when I was young, but you never saw a whole lot of school children, like, schools bringing their children into these concerts. That kind of educational thing is unfortunately, yeah, I think that needs to definitely start. And I think going from there, you'd have a understanding of how one then makes your world, like Angela joked it's just me, but I know that Angela, I think from what I know of Angela is that that people kind of make, like it's historians, it's, you know, you don't need to speak to people sometimes in your own field, but then you make a kind of network that feeds your interest and feeds your work across fields, you know, but for that to happen on a larger scale, you need it moving into how the education system works, then going into the art college.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, I've sought lots of inspiration from the work that both of you do. You know, I don't think it's only that you know, the dialogue that Angela, you know, has highlighted between, you know, her work and, you know, reading stuff by Goan academics. For me, it's actually been the reverse. It's been, you know, learning about from Angela's cartoons, for example, which have a very contemporary context, because Angela, I think, really has her ear to the ground and knows what's going on. And there's a great deal of not only sympathy, but empathy, I think, with local issues and local people. And that's so important. It really does come across in your art, Angela. And you say so much in the frame of one cartoon that, you know, speaks to me. In a very direct way. And Karishma, even though you say that your work has a more metaphorical take, perhaps, or more symbolic take on issues, it's extremely thought-provoking. It invites the audience to think more deeply, where they're not being given the answers directly. They're being asked to actually think about what it is that they're seeing. So I think that is important. But both of you are essentially, you know, very similar in saying that what moves across and between your work and in this greater realm of what we might think of as being a Goan engagement with the arts is the necessity for the space and the ability to have dialogue.
I'd like to say something related to the
Please,
previous question, also related to also one of like Angela's the cartoons that she had that you had commissioned for your you had asked her to illustrate.
Yeah, maybe Angela can share those on the screen.
You want to share it now?
Yeah.
Because at any rate, we only have a couple of minutes remaining, but I want to make sure that the audience sees your work. So maybe that's something that we can close out with. Yeah, and actually, Angela, if you just took us through a few of your pieces.
Yeah, so what Angela did was she like placed the people who are here, like place the Goan as the viewers of the people who want to be viewed not by the locals, but by, they're posting on Instagram to be viewed by some other, somebody else. So and then you don't really see the onlookers who are like, what is this guy up to? Like, you know, kind of streaking on this beach. So you kind of have these crop things, and then Angela's images brought back the people who are watching it. And I think
This one.
that it's a. I think that this also speaks to the like kind of the Goan subject that you're made into when you move out of the boundaries of Goa into larger Indian spaces, especially the middle zones, and you kind of have certain attitudes of what a Goan is placed on you. Like I've had, I think everybody has had these experiences. Many of my colleagues who have gone to art colleges and other places in India. And the thing is that if you don't kind of access culture like to an extent that the world is made really strong within Goa, before I'm talking back to education, you know, before you leave the state, you have others' voices speaking about who you are and what you're about, or what you're your ancestors are about, or what your place is about. So you kind of have, I think, the arts are like in all ways are extremely important to the people from the community that makes it, like for the people who are from the same place. So in that sense also, this is, yeah, I really love these pieces where you had, yeah, you had this audience, this first audience that's actually seeing what's going on,
Right.
and wondering about it.
And just by way of context, here Angela was commenting on an event that took place in Goa in a few months ago, where an Indian celebrity was streaking on a local beach in the midst of the pandemic, as if there was nothing going on, because Goa, must remain a holiday destination even when people are dropping dead. and as Karishma rightly says, sorry.
No SOPs. No, it was a full tourist season. They had the full mega parties or rave parties, the works.
Right.
Like
and at a time when Goa had the highest, for being such a tiny place, and as Karishma was saying, has not only the highest amount of people coming in from elsewhere in India, but also had the highest rate of infections in the country. And in the meanwhile, it was holiday season as usual, because it didn't matter that Goan people were dropping dead, I suppose. Yeah, what tell us about this piece, Angela, and then we may move on to a final piece from Karishma before we close out.
In this one, I'm squarely blaming the government for the utter chaos that took place in the second wave, where the official voice was there was nothing to fear if you had no comorbidities. That was the key word at the time. If you had diabetes or you had high blood pressure, which, I mean, it's become like having hair on your head or not. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's like kind of uh, like it's common. So the government telling you this, trying to pass the buck onto something which you can't help having, and they were creating this kind of illusion that things were okay for the rest of people who didn't have these comorbidities, and it was complete negligence, criminal negligence, in which so many people lost their lives just believing
and
them.
to keep the tourism industry running.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the only reason they stopped it is because of the intervention of the courts.
Right, which it's ridiculous that it took that to make it happen. Yeah. So no, I mean, I think, like I was saying earlier, I think, Angela, your work really does encapsulate the present moment so well. Yeah. And Karishma, a piece from you before we close out?
Also that people started going, like they started shutting down themselves, right? Before the government said you'll have to, like municipalities are taking their own call.
And local restaurants and bars as well. Yeah. Local businesses. Yeah.
How do I screen? On the screen. Okay. Sorry. Hey, I've forgotten how to.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think you could just click on the image you want to show us.
Okay. Fine. This was made at also this time where, because of the lack of oxygen, people were just passing away, just dying. Yeah.
Karishma, I notice a lot of knives in your painting. I mean, is there
Yeah. This is
something
like
you
a kind
can
of,
tell us?
this is a bit of a takeoff from from remember on Doordarshan when we had just one TV channel, then they used to show the Mahabharata every Sunday, and whenever they needed to show the war, they would show arrows moving from one direction and then the other direction. so
Okay.
this kind of happens to that, like, you know, you kind of, and then you have this psychotic figure dancing in the foreground, and the knives are just going to go behind him, you know, just kind of bang, get into each other.
Those are absolutely wonderful conversational pieces. If you have it in your sitting room, you can have a number of conversations around them, I would think.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the many hats that, you know, the person keeps wearing, and then you kind of have and the ear is fallen off into the fire, into the sacrificial fire, and then you have this bomb of pink 2000 rupee notes going to explode. Like, I just recently heard that Hindi phrase, paisa fake tamasha dekh, and I just can't get my head like I can't
You
yeah, you know, it just,
dated yourself.
huh,
We
it
heard it.
yeah,
Dated
very,
yourself as
yeah,
in
yeah, I did. Well, belated. I mean, I've never heard it before. But, you know, this thing of, like, you know, throw money and watch the show, you know, and that's what it is, kind of in a tragic disaster of what's happening.
Unfortunately, I think we're at time. I'm so glad that we could have this conversation. Again, thank you very much for joining me on this panel. I've learned a lot from discussing Goan art and your art. Thank you for all that you do, really. And, you know, looking forward to continuing these conversations elsewhere. So I think we'll call it a day for now. Thanks again.
Thank you.
thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Karishma. I hope to see you all in person.
Yes.